Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting fact-filled podcast episode of the Michael and Patty Show. I'm Michael.
And I'm Patty.
Today, we're coming to you live, recorded, of course, from the Charlottetown waterfront, where it's an absolutely beautiful day on the island. In fact, the whole year has been absolutely gorgeous. Today, we can see whitecaps. It's about 3 degrees here at approaching the end of October. What's new with you?
Not too much, and it is really beautiful. It's a little quiet down here, which in some ways can be kind of nice having the island back. Most of the tourists have left, but you're right. It's been an absolutely beautiful year weather-wise on Prince Edward Island. There's no cruise ships even today down here at the harbor, so it's quiet.
Everything is shut down. Tourist season is over, and the only things we're seeing is about 12,000 birds sitting on the docks where usually the boats are and the yachts are tied up to. Let's get right into it here. You had some concerns recently over agreements that are written that they're not consistent on, like there's no continuum of dates. They don't align. In other words, the contract is invalid for the most part because they're not referencing the proper dates on the purchase and sale agreement or the schedules. May it be a schedule A, B, C, whatever the case may be. There's no continuity, I guess is probably the more appropriate word.
On our contract agreements where it states this agreement, the agreement of purchase and sale date, this agreement, that is the date that the contract is written. Every document that is attached to the contract should always all reference the original agreement of purchase and sale date. Unfortunately, and it's not at the buyer's fault because they're trusting their real estate professional, but they are signing amendments or deletions, or there's counter offers that come into play, and they're referencing the date that they're signing the contract. However, when you are trying to piece together a story and trying to, work through a situation and, people feel, well, it doesn't really matter. Well, it doesn't matter until it does matter that your dates align with the original contract. And just so that you understand, and Michael, if you want to input, but if there's an amendment and the date, say, is October 26th, and that's the date they put on this amendment, whereas the contract was written on September 14th, my interpretation is there's a whole new agreement of purchase and sale that's dated for, today's date type thing. So you really have to make sure that your dates are in alignment and that if you're a realtor doing this business, that your counter references the original agreement, all amendments and deletions, all a reference, and have that original agreement of purchase and sale. If not, you're looking for a second agreement or a third agreement.
What I said to Patty in our conversation about a week or so ago is it doesn't matter until it matters. And what I mean by that is as long as you have a purchaser that wants to purchase and a seller that wants to sell, you're going to put this together regardless of what the paperwork looks like because they're all motivated to sell and to buy. But what happens is sometimes you get into conflicts and then, of course, the lawyers, and it's probably not the likely a judge is ever going to look at it. It's not TB, but the lawyers will look at it and say, show us the documentation. Well, the documentation, if it's not written properly, there could be portions of that can be omitted. And what I mean by that is when someone makes an offer, the purchase and sale says this is dated X, and it includes certain documents. So on paragraph, there is a paragraph on a purchase and sale form. Well, here it is. It's the largest paragraph. It's not numbered. It's over paragraph 1, but it basically says that Schedule A, the agency disclosure, and then you have a line there which you include other documents. So those documents are included in the purchase and sale agreement or the agreement overall to purchase. In addition to that, typically when a purchase and sale comes in, rarely are you going to accept it unless there's massive collaboration and you know exactly what's coming in. So usually there's a counteroffer. This is usually where you run into problems because agents are putting the date on the counteroffer as the date they're signing it or wrote the form rather than referencing to the original purchase and sale. So what happens to that counteroffer now, Patty?
Well, the parties assume they're signing the correct document. However, it's referencing an agreement that was apparently received that day and not 2 or 3 days ago, which is also the other issue. And I think we brought this up on a previous podcast episode, is that you can counter at any time. The buyer is obligated or committed to that contract that they put forth until the expiry time. When you enter into a counter offer, the counter should have the original agreement of purchase and sale date, which then both parties are re-entering and entering into a new contract. So you don't have to respond within the timelines that the buyer gave you. It's just the buyer is no longer committed to that contract and can move on and put an offer in on something else.
Different subject.
Yes, but all about dates.
So the same thing happens with the Schedule A or any amendments. They have to reference to the date of the purchase and sale. So if a lawyer or lawyers were to sit down and look at this stuff, the first thing they would do is they would omit any documents that are not indicated on the purchase and sale agreement above that paragraph 1 where it says completion date, and they would omit any documents that are not properly bound or referring to the parent document, which would be the purchase and sale. Moving on to something a little more interesting, which is kind of part of this, because the other part you run into is a he said, she said. Well, they said they would do this. The buyer said that they would do this. The seller said they would do that. Well, when you look into verbal contracts, they basically tell you not to do them in Canada, and I assume it's the same in the States, and everything should be in writing. Correct?
Yeah, especially as it pertains to real estate.
Always over document, always over disclose deficiencies is probably the 2 rules that I would suggest you live by in real estate.
Yeah, and always request, if there's a conversation between the agents, I would always end up, and I know I do this, I'm sure confident you do this as well, Michael, but I will please send this to me in an email. I do not want to be citing, here's what my client said, and then my client ends up backing out, or it's a husband-wife, and the husband said this, but the wife didn't agree, and I just put myself out there by saying that they agreed to this, and it just creates a bunch of confusion. So verbal contracts, even just saying, I agree to this work, or I, don't agree to doing this, get your clients to send it to you in an email. Get the agents should be saying to the other agent, could you send that to me in an email? And really, you're just making sure everything is documented and there's no verbal miscommunication, because it's easy to happen.
Good point. I'm just thinking of our third subject here, but I had another thought, but now I can't remember what it is.
That happens to people at your age.
It obviously does. You were through a house. Actually, I know what I was going to say. This is what happens when you don't take notes and have no script. What I tend to do is I have a series of acknowledgements that I get the parties to sign, and an example of that might be they may ask me a question like, are there oil tanks buried on the property? Well, the vendors already told us there is. I represent the purchaser, so I will tell them, yes, there's oil tanks buried on the property. I'll get them to sign an acknowledgement that acknowledges I told them this. So down the road, because you know a game they're going to play sometimes, I didn't know anything about the oil tanks, and it's going to cost us $50,000 to get them removed and have an environmental study done. I didn't know anything about this. So the acknowledgement, even though it's not typically bound to the contract, the purchase and sale agreements and amendments and so forth, it's good to have on file. I put it under a file called I Told You So. So if I go to the I Told You So file, I can whip out the amendment and say, no, you know about it, you signed it, it was witnessed. Sorry about your luck. Next subject, which hopefully will be more organized. We were through a house the other day that the agent said that all the windows needed replacing. Was this the case?
No, not necessarily.
They didn't need replacing. They needed to be recharged. Which there used to be a guy. I don't know if there is anymore, but you can actually, to the best of my knowledge, recharge these dual pane thermal windows rather than replacing all the windows in this particular house.
Yes, and I'm not sure at what point do they make the determination that recharging this window is not an option, whether it's to do with, as long as it's sitting tight in its window box, and perhaps if the glass hasn't been too badly stained as a result of the seal being broken within the panes. Again, I'm not a window expert, but yes, to have a buyer come back and say, it's going to cost me $30,000 to replace all these windows, whereas it could be an eighth or a quarter of the cost to just have them recharged or resealed, something to be aware of and to look into. But yeah, hopefully there is still a guy. I do have a window person that has done my office a few years ago. Hopefully he's still doing that, but just something to be aware of.
Well, if there isn't a guy, it'd be a good business to get into. Sometimes less is more. Patty and I have ranted and raved and gone on about pictures and video and all this sort of stuff. Sometimes you have a house that's best unseen, don't you?
Or seen just at your marketing, which any marketing company, you show the highlights of the home.
What if there are no highlights as it sits?
Every home has.
No, every home does not. This particular house I'm referring to, it's a house that I've gone into 3 or 4 times that I've intended to stage, but I just end up shaking my head and running out through the front door because there's so much work to be done. It's just one of these houses that has 4 layers of window coverings on each window. Every couch has 3 throws on it. Every hardwood floor has 4 mats thrown on it. There's crap everywhere. There's 3 times as much stuff that you need in this house. And I don't like to start reorganizing people's homes, especially without their permission. But in this particular case, I told these people, it does not present well. It needs to be staged. So I actually spent a few hours and I went out there. First thing I did is I took the video off of the listing because it just shows too much, which is the problem with videos, and especially these Manaport 3D imaging systems. They just show too much. Unless the house is perfect, you probably don't want to use them. But I spent a few hours at this house, and I went in because both Patty and I are professionally trained photographers, and I spent probably another 2 hours photographing 4 rooms. I deleted all the old photos on the listing of the hoarder house, and I uploaded my new pictures, which I thought turned out really well. I emailed them to the vendors because they insisted that we do this, we go through this process, and their response to me is this my home?
Well, that's a good compliment.
Which we had before. But the point to this topic here is sometimes less, like no video, less pictures is better, especially if you can take the time to stage them. We did this instantly. We haven't had showings in weeks. We had 2 showing requests that same day the pictures went on the system, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I was with clients yesterday looking at a property, and one of their points that they had said, and I didn't agree along with this, and I explained it to them, obviously, but when we got down to the basement, this particular home just fell apart for them. They weren't interested. And both the buyers ended up saying to me, well, why didn't they put this picture, a picture of, the basement, because I would have not come and viewed this property had I known the basement looked like this. And I said, the listing agent brokerage responsibility is to get you into the house. And they did exactly that. If you wanted to see a picture of the basement, and again, I love my clients in that, and I can be very candid and frank with them. Some people I might have to cushion this a little bit. But I said, if the basement was really, really important to you, we should have asked for a basement photo, which would have been in the B footage. I take pictures of my basements on my listings. I do not put them out there on my property listing because they're not selling features. They're not the highlights. I want the best. My responsibility is to show the property in its best light and to put forth the best pictures. And like you say, less is more. So once I explained that to them, they went, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. I do not showcase I don't put the oil tank in. I don't do the basement. If there's rooms, if a bathroom is too tight and it just doesn't show well in the photo, yes, it's mentioned in the details, but I don't need to add that picture of it. So just be aware when you're going through. If things don't align, there's probably a reason. Easy to ask your agent, could I get a picture of this because it could be a deal breaker and it'll save me driving 2 hours to take a look at this property, which was the case.
The listing agent's job is to market the property. They're not deceiving anybody. They're just showing off the highlights, no different than anyone selling a piece of furniture or a car or anything else, a piece of equipment. They're going to show off the highlights. When you step onto this particular property Patty was mentioning, by the way, my compliments in showing these waterlogged homes. Somebody has to. The idea would be is hopefully they can see past that basement and see the potential in the property. Would you agree with that?
Yes, because if they really loved the house and the house was offered at a fair market value, they could, I know it's a big job, and we did discuss this. This house isn't a house that they're moving forward with, but they could always, and it's done on the island from time to time, you see this, where they just raise the house and they put a new foundation underneath. We don't know what a buyer is willing to do for the home, continue to be a steward, continue to, prolong the life of it. A lot of homes are worth doing this with. And then there's those homes that they just don't make sense, or the buyers just don't have the financial capability to eliminate them. Yes, pictures, less is more is what we're getting to.
Let's get over to realtor.ca. And an annoying little feature that's been introduced recently that Patty didn't even know existed. Did you?
No.
So this annoying little feature that Canadian Real Estate Association has decided to put on realtor.ca is the price history of the house, which sounds just wonderful to who I have no idea. It causes issues for a number of reasons. I had a house that was listed for $350,000, which was fair market value. And when they scrolled down, it said purchase price, $43,000. But that was also 25 or 30 years ago. But it made it look like they're putting it on for $350,000, but they paid $43,000 for it because a lot of people are not going to read the fine print. So what I told Patty to do in this case is if she emails the CREA help desk, they will remove the history. The other thing I've found in the past is data errors. So I found houses that were listed at, say, $350,000, but then they'd say there was a sale for $17,000, and there never was. So I don't know where that data is coming from. I don't think price history should be on CREA at all. If they want the price history, they can ask their agent for accurate data, which comes from our internal system. But what do you think about that? Are you going to remove all your price histories now?
And no, I just didn't realize it was on the public view. I know when you're working with a real estate agent, a realtor, you have a custom collaboration site, which is part of the value of that. You get to see the full history. Yes, this is new information to me that CREA has just allowed it to be public view on realtor.ca. And yes, when you've got situations, especially our market on PEI and probably the Maritimes as a whole has changed so much. And just because a property sold for, 100 or 200,000 less 10 years ago doesn't mean that this person here is, greedy and this is where the market is. And this, unfortunately, is what happened after the pandemic. Our prices, they're higher now, but they're more reflective of what you can expect across Canada too. We've been very suppressed with our pricing. So if pricing is an issue, yes, I would definitely say go ahead, reach out to CREA and ask for your particular property. I want the history removed from the public view. Obviously not our database because that's the value of our...
Well, the listing agent would do this.
Correct.
The other thing I've run across is I had one client Google a property they're thinking about offering on, and they found it came up on all kinds of different websites, all kinds of different agents, all kinds of different brokers. So they came to the conclusion that this property had been on with all these different agents and all these different brokers, so now they wanted to put in a lowball offer. At such time I explained to them what was happening, Patty.
Really?
I just made this story up.
No, okay.
Really. This is real life stuff, boots on the ground.
And was it the same price on every single listing?
I didn't ask them that. They just came to the conclusion that it was on with 30 different agents and 10 different brokers, so there must be something deficient or wrong with the property, and they came in with a lowball offer because of it. But it was misinformation.
Absolutely, which again misinformation, why it's better to have the history come from a realtor because they can explain the situation. The same with this situation. We have DDF feed. So when a seller agrees and has that little box checked within their listing agreement, that's the value of being listed with a realtor and not an independent company where they just feature the property on one site. You have far more opportunity and chance to find the buyer when your property listing is out on hundreds of websites and platforms and YouTube. And
so is the DDF feed, which I believe in the States is referred to as IDX, that takes your listing and it syndicates it to a whole pile of other websites. So that's what they're seeing. When I heard this, I actually gave them the history of the property, and this was a brand new property that was just subdivided. It was the only time it was ever on the market. It was actually priced very reasonably, and it is now sold.
Good.
Closing costs. You had a question on closing costs, or you were indicating that purchasers should be concerned with this. And those closing costs, tell us about them. What should an average purchaser budget for closing costs in Prince Edward Island?
And this is something that we had a discussion at my office, our training on Tuesday, was what does closing costs entail? And it was an interesting discussion because everyone had a little bit of a different viewpoint, which is completely fine. However, it is worth a conversation. My interpretation of closing costs is a buyer who has made the decision to purchase a property. What can I expect to pay? Now, some will just say closing costs is your legal fees and everything at the end. But my interpretation of closing costs, if I'm working with the buyer, is everything. It's from the day you decided to buy. What is your home inspection cost? What is your, if there's a septic inspection, if there's any kind of work with regards to the buying process, as well as your land transfer tax if you're not a first-time home buyer on this planet. Island Regulatory Appeals Commission, if it's a property and you're not an island resident and it exceeds the required amount under our Land Protection Act. So again, we've gone into that in a previous episode. Your lawyer fees, your deed registration. I don't include moving costs and your deposit. And actually, your deposit's not part of...
Deposits on utilities. There's another line to that.
Oh, okay.
Hattie's reading my notes.
Well, I was just checking them out, Michael. Again, for me to summarize, it is your home inspection, any inspections that you have to pay for from a professional septic inspection, those fees. I also say your land transfer tax, which on Prince Edward Island is 1% of the purchase price. Your legal fees, if you have title insurance, that's going to be all added in there. So all those fees, in my opinion, are closing costs. And what that number is I tell clients to budget for approximately 3%. Now, the National Association of Realtors, they have between 2 and 5%. As an office, my office, we agreed 3%, give or take, was a fair number to give to a buyer to budget for purchasing a property. What do you say?
2 to 5%.
Yes.
So I would probably take the worst case scenario because there could be other stuff too. Who knows? Maybe there's some deficiencies with the property they have to fix. Whatever. Hole in the roof. Finger? Yeah. Just give me the one finger.
I guess I missed... And the other part of the closing costs that I missed is if there's any fuel adjustments. So the buyer is purchasing a full tank of, if it's propane or oil, if the home is heated and with that fuel type and it's not electricity, as well as if the seller has paid for the property taxes for the entire year and you're buying the property mid-year, you are reimbursing or compensating the seller for the money that they've paid out on their property taxes. So that's all part of the closing costs and something that the lawyer looks after.
If an agent is showing properties to potential buyers, is that agent going to take the time to turn up the heat, fire up the lights, open the curtains, maybe throw a nice hot handmade apple pie in the oven to prepare that house for a showing typically?
Buyer's agent? No. It would be nice, but no.
Well, it wouldn't be nice
Not the
because
apple pie portion.
there could be some liability there, because you know what's going to happen when they open the curtains. They're going to fall off the wall, and then they turn up the heat, and the place goes up in flames. Or like, there's a liability there as well. You don't want to be touching another agent's listing without their permission. I wouldn't touch it even with their permission. Have the owners set it up or the listing agent. But this particular case, this seller thought that agents are going to go in there and prep the house for the listing, for the showing. And I said to her, I said, they might be showing 10 houses that day. They don't have the time to stage 10 houses and then unstage them afterwards, or turn the heat back down, eat the apple pie, cover the windows back up. It's not going to happen. Bottom line is, if you're having your house shown, make sure the listing agent or you as the owner prepare it for that showing. Turn the lights on, turn the heat up so it's comfy. When I was in the other day, it was probably 2 degrees Celsius. It's the seller's and the listing agent's job to prep that house. Typically, the purchaser agent, if they're smart, will not touch anything. Because the other thing they could say is, well, they went through the house and my Rolex watch is missing. That's never happened on the island I'm aware of, but they could.
Yes, well, I do have a story on that, but that's another time. I having shown 4 properties yesterday as a buyer's agent, I did not have time to tell my clients to stay in their vehicles so I could run inside, quick and prepare the home.
Give me a half an hour.
And then I'll come back out and tell you when it's okay to come in. They're very tight. We're tight with our times. They follow me into every home. I do flip on, some light switches. A couple of the homes were vacant. So I did turn on some light switches, but I don't touch anything beyond that. And I do make sure that I turn off the lights unless instructed not to, because there's a showing that's following me. But I don't have time. I'm not going to sit there and tell my clients, yeah, if you don't mind, I need 5 minutes to turn on all the lights in here so that you see the house in its best light. No pun intended.
What's the best way for a lonely real estate agent to have 100 new friends instantaneously?
Well, I don't know what you're going to get into, but I know, and you're saying as an agent?
If I'm a lonely real estate agent, what's the best way for me to have 100 friends within 30 seconds?
Okay, I don't know as an agent. I know as a
let me
client.
answer that.
Okay.
You go on to Ask PEI, it's a Facebook group, and ask them if anyone knows a good real estate agent.
But see, that's not a real estate agent that does that. That's a lonely person out in our community.
It's funny to see that post. Does anyone know a real estate agent? Which brings us to our next subject. If you're looking for say a home inspector or a construction person or a roofer or a plumber or electrician, or you're trying to arrange for a mortgage and you're looking for a mortgage broker, talk to your agent, assuming you have one, and you should if you're looking to purchase. They should have a knowledge base and endless resources to give you the proper contacts to get the job done or get your mortgage arranged. Do not go to these Facebook groups or wherever asking Joe Public for the input on this, because it's going to end up in total chaos, potentially misinformation, and you may or may not be getting that information from a qualified resource. If your agent is experienced, they should be able to supply you with a list of these people that will do a good job that they stand behind.
Yeah, that they've had success with and have the testimonials from their past clients that say, I've had great success with this professional, therefore they go into I'm going to be referring this person if they've made this transaction so smooth. The thing to be aware of, and this whole ask, whatever the community's name is, because I know there's communities in Ontario, I know on PEI it's called Ask PEI. With that group out there, you are going to end up as well getting family members who are trying to help their family member get business, so they may recommend their home inspector, a home inspector who just happens to be their cousin, uncle, brother. The same with a mortgage lender. Or so you got to be very careful and mindful of that. I know myself, if I have a client that's had a bad experience, I don't write off a professional on one. But if I do get 2 or 3 different streams from different clients that say, Patty, I've just not had a good experience with this person, I will I will reach out to that professional and let them know, because I would expect and appreciate the same courtesy paid to myself. But I will end up refraining from directing clients there. I will not deter them if they find them on their own, but I will redirect.
The reason I brought this up is because both you and I have had instances where people have gone onto Google or they've gone onto Facebook groups and they find their own contacts that end dismally.
I know.
Or they end up not being able to close the deal because they used the wrong mortgage broker, which we could have told them from the beginning, do not use XYZ, use ABC, and you'll get things done. What else do we have here? We have home inspections, everybody's favorite topic. Is a home inspection a deal breaker if I am a house seller?
If you're a seller of a property, it can be a deal breaker depending on what the issues are. So that's how I would answer that.
The way I would answer it is it would come down to the interpretation and who the buyer is, and how badly they want the house, how much money they have behind them to fix any alleged problems that were brought up, because sometimes home inspectors will bring up issues that aren't issues. All in all, it comes down to the purchaser. I find that home inspections are an awesome tool. I think everyone should have one done. But when I get a home inspection done, I'm just looking for the major stuff. Foundation, high-tech plumbing, super bad electrical. Maybe it's got old screw-in fuses or whatever. But home inspections, all of them are going to find a whole series of issues. You as the purchaser have to understand that that's normal. There's never a house that has a home inspection that comes back 100% perfect.
Take it as this is as if you've already lived in the house. And I think we covered this in a previous episode. As if you've lived in the home already for 3 to 5 years is what the home inspection report offers you. I know every home I've ever purchased, I've always had a home inspection done. However, it is not to renegotiate the contract agreement or to necessarily walk away. Grounds, unless you have a savvy buyer who is a contractor or understands and have maybe the funds behind them to do any remedies. But I usually advise my clients, if the property is not structurally sound and you can't take that on, if there's mold issues, because that'll also impact and affect insurance, if there's any active leaks throughout, that there's a problem going on, if the seller's not taking care of the home and these are all the deficiencies going on, do you really want to take this on? Because as you live into the home inspectors can only inspect what is exposed and visible. They can't get into tearing off walls and, exposing areas that they cannot see. So they can only see so much. If there's this many that the home inspector can come up with, what else is hiding in there? But it's usually those main components that I advise and bring to my buyer's attention.
And in my opinion, the best thing you can do as a home seller is have a pre-home inspection done. Have a home inspection done before putting the house on the market. And there's a number of reasons why you would do this that we're not going to get into here, but it is a methodology to get you better offers at the end of the day. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, if you're a seller, and it also shows if you're a buyer, if the home inspection report, because they don't have to disclose it, but it's in their best interest if they did, it displays to the buyer transparency, confidence in the seller, as well as, the seller's already aware of these problems. I'm not going to be able to start negotiating the contract down.
What do you think of these voicemails agents get? And people saying, well, I've called a number of agents, but I never get a call back. Because the message consists of, hi, I'm calling about a property. Can you call me back? What do you think of those? Do you return those calls? Knowing you probably would.
I do majority of the time call them back, or I will get somebody, one of my agents at my office, to return the call to check in and see what they're inquiring on. However, we don't know what we're calling about. We don't know what we're walking into, and which is why sometimes I wouldn't if they're not giving.
Here's my biggest fear in these types of messages. You call them back and you ask me, what property are you inquiring on? Go ahead. You're the agent. Go ahead. Call me. Phone's ringing. Ring, ring.
Hi.
Hi.
Did you leave a message on my voicemail to give you a call back?
Who's this?
Hi, my name is Patty Castle, and I have a voicemail message. I believe it's your voice on it has called and asked me to call
How do
back.
you say your last name?
Okay. Moving forward from the name, did you call on a property? Is there
I called
something-
about a bunch of properties. I had a few beers and I was out with friends on the weekend.
So you don't know which one. I get your point. They will also say, well, it's got your name on the sign.
We're still in the phone call.
I know, but
So continue. So I don't know what property it is. We're out driving around with friends, and then you get the old, well, it was near, there was a white house, and it was down, it could have been Burlington, maybe it could have been Darnley, or we went over to Victoria and then off to Surrey. It was somewhere between Surrey and Darnley. That's what you get. So when people say the agents don't return the calls, chances are the voicemail that you're leaving doesn't give them any tangible information or motivation to return the call. A nice voicemail might be, hi, I've seen this property. I looked it up on realtor.ca. It's quite detailed. You've got great pictures and video. However, I do have a couple quick questions pertaining to the basement and what size of breaker panel is in there, because I want to know if I can hook up a generator. My name is this, my phone number is that. These are the times I'm typically available, or alternatively, you can text me or email me at this address. That would be a good voicemail to get. You'd return that call.
yes, 100%. I would probably still send them off, but at least they'd be far more informed. They could have the property information brought up in front of them on their computer, which then the buyer's question, the consumer's question, will be answered better informed in a more timely manner versus, I don't know who this is or why they're calling or what they're calling about. I can't prepare for this call. It's just setting everyone up for failure.
Lastly, we're going to cover having hissy fits and trying to walk away from contracts, whether you're the purchaser or the seller. And what I mean by that is, depending on the people and the agents involved in any transaction, sometimes they can become very emotional. It can become very stressful. And you'll have people that just say, that's it, I'm walking away from the deal. The challenge to that is you've entered into a contract, providing your contract is valid. As per our earlier conversation in this podcast, you're stuck in that contract and you could be held monetarily responsible and could be sued. Will you be sued? Probably not, but they could, or they could scoop your deposit depending on where you are as far as being a purchaser. What's your advice for these people? Have ethics, have morals, follow through with what you said you would do in the agreement, and try to isolate yourself from the emotion involved in the transaction, because it's just because the buyer wants the things fixed or the seller doesn't want to fix them, there's no reason to walk away from the deal. Just continue to communicate. At the end of the day, you're probably going to work things out 90% of the time, wouldn't you think?
And 90% of the time, and that's where it is so important to have realtors and not trying to sell your home on your own. By having realtors, and if you have a confident realtor with experience, they're going to be able to manage the expectations, maintain control, put the buyers and sellers can be really intense with their emotions. They could be selling a home that they've loved due to life circumstances or work relocation, whatever. And the buyers, could be their first home. They could be noise from family members going, you need to do this, you need to do that. It doesn't matter what the buyers and sellers are saying. If you have two really good, confident, professional realtors involved, they're going to put it through. I have what's called the Patty filter. So I put it through the Patty filter, and the only message or the only part that gets conveyed to the other agent on the other side is just the most important things. Again, I can't stress the realtor professionalism that.
So the Patty filter is able to take vile, disgusting, almost looks like raw sewage mixed with oil and old leaves, and it comes out purified water.
Oh, absolutely. It has been put to work many, many times.
Well, that's it for today's podcast.
I think we covered a lot of great topics, and some of them connected in with one another. So If you do have any topics or any questions about Prince Edward Island or about real estate, or if you've had a real estate experience and you'd like a little bit of an outside opinion or what you should do, feel free to drop us a line or an email, and we'd be happy to, do some research and maybe have it on one of our future episodes.
Have a great day, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening.